Hi, my name is Valerie. Thank you for joining me today. I wanted to do a review today on the ACE curriculum. ACE stands for Accelerated Christian Education. They use booklets called PACES. So if you hear me call something a PACE, refer to PACE, I'm talking about the individual booklets that this program uses. So there are 12 PACES in each subject per school year. So if you're in third grade, you will do 12 English PACES. You will do 12 social studies PACES, 12 science PACES, etc. Each PACE, the way they have this 4-digit number, and each grade has a series of these numbers that they complete, and that's kind of how you know. They don't actually call it third grade, but you do these numbers here, and that guides you on the way. So as an overview of the program, I've already mentioned a few of the subjects that they cover, but the topics they cover, the individual subjects they cover, are word building, social studies, Bible reading, science, English, creative writing and literature, that's elementary only, and math. And then they have several electives that you can take as well. They have speech and different ones like that. You feel free to look at their website, which I will put in the link below. And also, if you're interested in seeing samples of individual subjects and pages, you can visit christianbook.com and type in the 4-digit number. You need to have that number to see the individual PACE, and they will show you a few images of each one to give you an idea. But I'll elaborate a little bit on the different subjects. So word building would be spelling. Social studies is history. Bible reading is a series of booklets where they actually reprint the Bible passages, the King James Version, into the booklet, and then the student answers questions about the Bible reading. So if you're studying about the days of creation, the questions would be like, on which day did God create Adam and Eve? Things like that. They ask Bible questions based on the Bible that they're reading, and it's not, as I've already mentioned, it is not a summary of the scriptures. It is actually reprinting. They reprint the scriptures into the PACE. They put difficult words at the top so that they can cover those and know what they mean. And then that's about it. There are some other activity pages, crosswords and things like that, coloring sheets for the younger grades. But that is only for grades 1 through 5. After that, they don't really have any Bible until you get to high school and you get into the electives. And they give you Old Testament survey, New Testament survey, the life of Christ, different ones like that. Then science, obviously, science. There are no lab experiments in the lower grades. I think they have updated the program since I did it. I actually used this program as a student for most of my grade school and high school career. I attended a Christian school, and the Christian school I attended used these materials. They've updated them, revised them a lot since then because that's been a few years. So they have changed things. But when I was in high school, they didn't offer any kind of lab experiments for biology, chemistry experiments, etc. But they may do that now. I just can't really answer to that. Obviously, math is pretty self-explanatory. Then they have creative writing and literature where they read books, and these are Christianized versions. When my daughter did, I forget what year it was, but my daughter did the creative writing and literature. I'm wanting to say maybe 4th or 5th grade, and they had her read Heidi. And I thought she's reading Heidi, but I discovered later it's a very Christianized and shortened version of Heidi. It is not the original one that you would find in the library. So I was disappointed that they sort of altered the classic because I would have liked her to read the actual classic. So I've kind of since then shied away from the creative writing and literature PACES because I'd like them to get the actual books and read them. I will say that the creative writing portion of those PACES was very good, helped them to learn to write in different styles, and so that was a good fit for our family, especially for those days. In case you haven't noticed, it's a program that's really convenient for moms that have several children in several different grades because it's very hard to teach 3rd grade science, 5th grade science, and 8th grade science and do well at it, and then teach all those ages in math and all those ages in English. It's very overwhelming for the homeschooling mom. So this is a nice alternative for some of those subjects where you can be involved as much or as little as you want, and you can rest assured the kids are learning. They're reading, they're answering questions, and they're being tested on what they learn. And so you can, make sure they're getting the information. So to give you an overview of how PACEs work, as I've mentioned, there are 12 in each subject per year. And this is kind of how they look. I will show you just the inside of this one. So this is going to be, I think this one is 11th grade. So this is kind of an overview, black and white. This is the wisdom booklet that they tear out and read. So that's not actually part of. They're reading Macbeth in this PACE, and so you can see that there's some of the information, and then they have questions that they fill in. Then the student goes and scores their own material. I keep the score keys in binders for each of my children, and we keep them in a central location in the kitchen, and there are red pens for grading and marking things wrong. And it's an honor system. They grade it, they mark it wrong, they close the score key, they go back to their seat, they make the correction, then they go back to the score key and make sure they did it right, and then they're done. So that eliminates a lot of grading time for me. Now, the parent needs to be vigilant and make sure that if their child is missing a lot, that they are learning, they're correcting them, they're not just filling in the answers and then forgetting about it. They're actually looking up, well, why did I get that wrong? What did I miss? And so the parent needs to oversee the scoring process. Obviously, they're going to have questions about the material, even though it is self-paced and the book is, the teacher. You still need to, as a parent, be sure that they're retaining the information, they're understanding, and when they have a question, obviously they'll need to get your help with it. So parents are involved. You can be involved as little or as much as you'd like, but there is a minimum amount of involvement that the parent should have with this program. So I've marked a few places to show you. The way this program is set up is every time the student starts a new PACE, this one is the economics book. They read this aloud to the parent. I guess when they're older, they don't have to do this if you don't want them to, but they read what they're learning, so you are aware. So like in this book, they're learning about free enterprise, the free enterprise system, growth, business cycles, business organization, management, labor. These are the topics that are covered in this book. And so that's what they're going to be learning. Then there's the vocabulary, and this will be covered in various sections of the PACE. But to begin with, here are the objectives of what they'll be learning and their vocabulary. Then we have, in the middle of the PACE is the PACE test. So there's that. This is torn out by the parent. When you give the PACE to the student, you tear this out and file it away. They're not to look at this. This is the final test on the whole book. So if you forget to tear that out, they have the answers, or the questions. They see the questions for the test. So that's the first step. Then, sorry, I thought these tabs would be quicker. There are 3 what they call checkups. This is what it looks like for this booklet. So the checkup is like a quiz. It covers that section of the PACE. So there are 3 of these. So they break the PACE up into 3 sections, and the child masters one section before moving on to the next. For the checkup, all the previous pages in the PACE must be scored and corrected. The student they are free to look this over ahead of time to be familiar with what the questions are. There's no surprises, no secrets. Then the parent puts their initial at the top of the checkup, and that means the student has permission to take this checkup. Now the parent can then either score the checkup themselves to see how they're doing, or they can have the student score the checkup and write the grade up here, and then the parent checks the grade and keeps an eye on their progress. Either way. They take the 3 checkups, and then by the end of the checkups, they take what is called a self-test. Now, I've heard different people doing this different ways. Some parents use the self-test as a open book test. The child is free to look back at anything they don't know. My personal way of doing this is they are free to study it ahead of time and look it over and see what's on it, make sure there, again, are no surprises. But I do not let my children look back on the self-test. They just have to know the material. So again, you sign it. They say the memory verse, if there is one in the PACE, they say that to you from memory because they are going to be writing it from memory. That's another thing I failed to mention. Each PACE has a memory verse. Yes, each PACE in each subject. There's not one verse for that section of PACEs. Each PACE has a verse. So they're learning, if they're taking 5 ACE classes, then they're going to have 5 verses to memorize every 3 weeks because that's how long it takes to start a PACE and get to the end. It should take 3 weeks or less if your student wants to work ahead, but no more than 3 weeks. That enables them to finish the 12 booklets in a school year. So when they finish the self-test, they look it over again after it's scored to see what. I always grade the self-test. I don't let my children grade them. I check them, and if they're missing a lot, that's a red flag. We don't take the test until we cover what they have failed to master. And then when they think they've got it, then I give them the test, which I showed you earlier that you tear out at the beginning. You give that to them. They do not have the PACE to look back on. That is a closed book test, and they need to pass, they need to make an 80% or above on the final test. If they don't make an 80 or above, A.C.E. recommends that you order the PACE again and have them go back through it again to be sure they understand the material. Now, before you panic, a PACE is only about $3.30 for an individual PACE, so they're not expensive. But, you keep having to redo them. Not only are you spending more money on the material because you're having to keep buying more PACEs, but it's also taking your child longer to complete the work. So that every PACE is set up just like that. They have the 3 checkups, they have the self-test, and they have the test at the end. There are a lot more color. Here's an example of a math PACE. Now, I personally don't use the math curriculum. I'm not a math person myself, and I don't find my children tend to struggle with math as well, and the instructions given in the PACE are just not thorough enough for us to really follow them and understand them. But I did order one years ago to see if it might be something we could use. Because they are so cheap, it was very easy to order just one PACE. And it's the same format. You begin the PACE, you tear out the test in the middle. This child reads what they're going to be covering, and there's the memory verse that they'll be studying in this PACE. Then the younger elementary grades have these cartoons that teach a little lesson. And my children say they're a little cheesy and corny, but, Then this is an example. They just dig right in at the beginning. So again, we have the checkups. Here's an example in the younger grades. I believe this is a 5th grade math PACE. So this is how it would look. And the same thing, they do a review section in the math. I do like, when I was younger and doing the A.C.E. math, they didn't have this graph paper outline there. That would have been very helpful. I really struggled keeping my numbers lined up in the longer multiplication and division, so that's nice. But anyway, it's a self-test and test, just like the other book that I showed you. This is an example. Now, these have been completed. My kids did this. My youngest son did this. So this is, they have you practice cursive and the younger English and address envelopes. And it is, as you can see here, this is a 3rd grade book, and they have these little cartoon characters that travel all the way through with them. The science PACE is blue. And this one is my kids have just promoted, this is 6th grade. So this is what the 6th grade material in science looks like. The definitions, and this is the type of thing they fill in. And one more to show you, the social studies. And this is 5th grade as well. And this is what it's like. They read, they answer questions. Now, the higher you get in the grades, some PACEs have an activity pack that they tear out, and that's where they write their answers. The reading is actually in the separate part, so that way they can fold back the questions and fill them in as they're doing the reading. They don't have to flip back and forth on pages, so that's nice. So I'm going to give you a quick idea of the pros and cons. The pros: it is self-taught and explained. So it's really good for science, Bible reading, social studies, even the English. They're pretty good about explaining the material, and the kids just then go and answer the questions. So that's a pro. If you are busy and you have several kids in different grades, I highly recommend using A.C.E., especially for those 3 or 4 subjects that I mentioned. Now, personally, the spelling and the math, I've already told you why the math didn't really work for us. The spelling did not work for us because I found it to be very simple and easy. It really felt like just busy work. The words were too easy for my kids. It was repetitive and boring. So I don't really recommend using the word building, but some moms may love it. So it's totally up to you. It's also very inexpensive compared to a lot of curriculum. It's about $33 for a year of one subject, compared to a Becca where it can be $100 to $150 depending on what materials you need to buy for that subject. That's a huge cost reduction. Also, it's Christian material, so you can be sure that your kids are getting a Christian perspective. It's easy to manage, as I've mentioned, with a large family, not only because the parent doesn't have to do any real preparation to speak of. It's also few materials. You have score keys and you have the paces, and that's it. You don't have separate books or other keys to manage and organize. So it's also little to no teacher prep. If you want to be involved, if you want to take the science paces, for example, sometimes there is a science project included, something pretty simple that uses household items. But for instance, in this booklet, my daughter learned about diseases, infectious diseases, non-infectious, etc. So I could have gone online, researched diseases, and maybe found some experiments or projects that she could have done to go along with that to enhance it. And sometimes we have found ways to integrate outside projects into what they're learning. And that same is true of history. Whatever topic you're studying, you could find projects, you could read online more information about the people that you're learning about, and you can really add to it or not. It's totally up to you. So the cons. Only your score keys can be reused. You have to buy new paces for every student. There is no way around it. It would be way too much work and trouble for you to answer the questions on notebook paper and try to score that and keep it straight. It's just easier to use the pace, in which case that means you're going to have to throw it away or something at the end of the year. Sometimes, as I mentioned with the math, there's just not enough explanation given in the booklet. I've found that to be true in English as well. Sometimes the examples they give are not enough, and even though they give you more than enough examples to practice on, they don't give, if you're struggling, you need something else. You need more explanation. So that's when the parent has to really muster up all your strength and resources to help the child understand the material. So that could be a negative. As I've also mentioned about the word building, some materials are just not challenging enough. Your kid gets bored, and you don't want to just fill their day with busy work. You want them engaged in learning. Also, some of the depictions of Christianity in the paces are rather corny and cheesy. Not at all like real life when you have real struggles and real battles that you're fighting and facing. Your little cartoon friends are just not going to do it for you. And especially in the older paces, they kind of jump the shark on a few of their illustrations and demonstrations. So in conclusion, it can help you while you have little ones. It's great in a pinch. If you're really overwhelmed, burdened, and busy, this is a nice option. It teaches your children to be independent learners, which is very good if you have a child that needs to stay on task. Taking a subject from A.C.E. and saying, okay, I need you to do 3 pages in this today, and I'll be back in a minute to check on it. And then that's a good way to help them see, okay, can I do 3 pages? It's a way to teach them to be self-disciplined and stay on a task until it's completed. So that's a benefit to it. Obviously, as I've already mentioned, you can always add to it to enhance it. So those are some of my opinions and ideas. Also, I have written a blog post on my website, and I'm going to put a link to that in the description below. That is a post on how to overcome some of the weaknesses in A.C.E., some of the ways I've tried to do it over the years. because it has been a go-to curriculum for my family for a very long time. I've used it off and on for years, and it's just been a blessing to have it available, and not just because it doesn't require a lot of teacher preparation or effort, but because it is cost effective. And some years my budget was just less than other years, and so it was great to have this as an option. So I hope this helps you. If you have any questions about A.C.E., something I didn't cover, please feel free to comment or ask below. I would love to try to help you. As always, I appreciate you watching, and please like and subscribe.